This is part 2 of my grammar, spelling, and punctuation guide lessons for criminal justice writing and rhetoric. So now we're going to talk about some very simple things, and then we're going to go on to a very important topic, which is pronoun usage. So number 5 on page 4 is about split infinitives. An infinitive is simple. An infinitive is a verb that is unconjugated, and it has the word to in it. To sing, to spell, to read, to write. They're infinitives. When you split an infinitive, you put an adverb in the middle, like to incorrectly sing, to incorrectly spell. And what you want to do is just avoid it by putting to spell incorrectly, to sing incorrectly. So just be careful. If a to and a verb that is unconjugated are together, it's in the infinitive form. And if you split it and put something in the middle, it's not preferred. It's okay, it's allowed, but we would prefer in the English language that you not split your infinitives up. So again, an infinitive is a verb that is in its unconjugated form, and the word to is part of it. To read, to write, to speak, anything with the word to clean, to cook. So just don't put anything between those when you're not conjugating the verb after the word to. That's split infinitives. Another thing that is very common with all of us are dangling participles, which is number 6 on page 4. Basically what that is when you begin a sentence with something that describes something that's going to come after it. For example, on page 6, being violent, the attorney refused to be alone with the defendant. Being violent, comma, the next should refer to the subject of the sentence because it becomes in the beginning. So being violent, comma, the attorney, well, that doesn't make sense because the attorney is not being violent. It is the defendant who is being violent. So it should be being violent or because the defendant was violent, comma, the attorney. So it has to, whatever comes before that dangling participle, that participial phrase beforehand, whatever becomes there before that first comma, the subject of the sentence must match it. So if you said being violent, the defendant scared the attorney, that's fine because being a violent person, the defendant, who is the violent person, scared the attorney. So as long as the beginning phrase matches what the subject of the sentence is, you're fine. But a really good example in here is entering the dark room, his eyes slowly blah, 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 adjusted to the dimness. Well, your eyes can't enter a room on their own. So as you would say, as he entered the darkened room, his eyes slowly adjusted to the dimness, which makes more sense because he and his eyes are one and the same person. And here's another one on page 5. Having reviewed the transcript, a few comments occurred to me. Well, the comments didn't review the transcript. A person reviewed it. So it's much better if you say, having reviewed the transcript, comma, I have a few comments. So having reviewed the transcript happened by I, by the person who is the subject of the sentence, I. And so we don't want to have participial phrases hanging out there without the correct reference. So if it's describing a person, that person needs to be the subject of the sentence. Okay. Most importantly, we need to talk about pronouns because pronouns have been hijacked by popular culture in expressions like me and him went to the store. Well, that is absolutely impossible because me and him didn't go to the store. If you wanted to say we went to the store, that's a first person plural pronoun, and it's not an objective. It doesn't receive any action. It is the doer of the action, so it has to be the subject pronouns. If you can see under number 7 on page 5, the subject pronouns are, in other words, these are the only ones that can be the subject of the action of the sentence. So we have I, you, he, she, we, and they, and of course it. They're the subject pronouns, so only they can be the doer of the action in a sentence, which is, of course, the subject of the sentence. So you would say, he and I went to the store, not me and him. Okay? Now, me and him have their purposes and their object pronouns. They receive the action of the sentence, and they can only act as object pronouns. That is, a person or a thing receiving an action. So what are the object pronouns? They're me, him, her, us, and them. They are the object pronouns. I do not know, and I've never been able to figure out how these got captured by the popular culture and turning object pronouns into subject pronouns. I have no idea. Trends can happen very easily with a song, with a movie, or just people just changing the way that they do things, but they are completely incorrect. And I have to point out to you, the word I, the pronoun I, is always capitalized. Okay, so no matter how you use it in a sentence, no matter where it is, you're going to capitalize it. It's just the rule, and we have to obey the rules to be clear in our speech. Okay, so let's look at some of the examples. These personal pronouns are either going to be the subject of the sentence or the object of the sentence. So let's look at the incorrect, and then let's look at the correct. It was me who prepared the document. Now, it's very common to hear it was me. Well, it's totally incorrect. And why? Well, you're going to say it is the subject of the sentence. But it is the subject of the sentence, but with the verb to be. And anytime you have the verb to be, it's like an equation. It's like an equal sign. It is I who prepared the document, because I and it are the same thing in the sentence because of the verb to be. So the verb to be, we're going to have the subject and the object being the same type of pronoun, of a subject pronoun. So it is she who is coming. It is he who is coming. It is we who are coming. It is you who is coming. So it is they who are coming. Even though it doesn't sound right to your ears, remember the verb to be is going to be an equal sign, and the subject and what you would think is the object of the sentence are both going to be subject pronouns, and that's the only exception. Me and him went to the store. That's actually painful for me to hear at this point in my life. When I hear this, it's like nails on a chalkboard. I feel like somebody's doing the nails on the chalkboard kind of sound. It just absolutely upsets me. He and I went to the store, because he and I are subject pronouns, and they can only be the action, the doers of the action of the sentence. James and her drafted the appellate brief. It has to be, of course, James and she drafted the appellate brief. Either him or me will do the site checking. Well, either him or me, these are being used is an either or situation, but they're still the subjects of the sentence. So it has to be either he or I will do the site checking. Us on the jury voted to convict the defendant. Now, I'm sure this one is nails on a chalkboard to you, because you know it would be we on the jury voted to convict the defendant. For some reason, we seem to do okay with the subject pronoun we. It's like me and him that seems to be the one that has everybody, and me and her, has everybody speaking incorrectly. It was them who informed the police. This is the same situation. It was they. Remember, when you see the verb to be, so that's is, was, were, okay? When you see those are, like I said, is, when you see them, the subject and what appears to be the object, but it's not really the object, has to be equal. So they're both subject pronouns. It was they who informed the police. Now, when pronouns are the subject of the sentence, you have to kind of figure out how they're being used in the sentence. So look at the first example. You must give John and I clear instructions. You is correct. That's no problem. You must give John. Now, John and someone, in this case, Professor Paparozzi, are receiving clear instructions. So we're receiving the action of the sentence. So John, you must give John and me, because remember, me is the object pronoun. It has to be used as the receiver of the action. So you must give John and me clear instructions is the way to do it. We urge you to release Sam and he from their employment contracts. Now, people think they sound intelligent when they use the subject pronouns as object pronouns. But again, we urge you to release Susan and him, because Susan and him are receiving the action, and so therefore the correct sentence is, we urge you to release Susan and him from their employment contracts. It has to be him, because him in this sentence is receiving the action. He's an object pronoun, and you must use an object pronoun. She has provided the committee and we with the budget analysis. And like I said, most of us get we and us correctly. And so she has provided the committee and us with the budget analysis. That's a pretty easy one. It seems to be very, very easy on your ears, and so you know it's correct. The prisoner was released into the custody of Janet and they. Well, it's terribly incorrect, and I think you can hear that. They and them also is like we and us, and you can kind of hear when it's incorrect. But again, them is receiving the object, the action of the sentence, so it's an object pronoun. Now, this is my biggest pet peeve, so please get this right from now on. Between is a preposition, and anytime there's a preposition, you go to the objective case, okay? So you can't use between you and I. People think they sound smart. To me, they sound like third graders. They sound, third graders are even smarter. When you're, between is a preposition, and preposition always takes, when in this kind of scenario, must take the objective case. So it's between you and me. So please use between you and me from now on. Between you and me, the defendant is liable. But a lot of people trying to sound smart say between you and I, and they sound, as I said before, they sound uneducated, okay? So it's between you and me. And I noticed over the years that I've been teaching criminal justice writing and rhetoric, the one quiz that people tend to take the most is the one about these pronouns, especially they keep getting between you and I incorrect. They said between you and I when it's always between you and me. And now how can you test that? You and I would equal, if there's two of us, you and I would be we, right? So would you say between we, which is also in the subject, a subject pronoun? No, you'd say between us. And us is you and me, okay? Us receives action, you and me receives action. So that's why, and in this particular case, the action of the preposition working in this case, the preposition is between, so it's between you and me. So please stop saying it if you say it, and when you take that quiz, don't get it wrong. Okay, now a lot of people misuse letter B under number 7, which is at the bottom of page 5. A lot of people use reflexive pronouns like myself, yourself, himself, herself, ourselves, yourselves, and themselves. A lot of people use them wrong. They use myself instead of me or whatever. And basically what you want to do is anytime you use one of the self words, myself, yourself, etc., it has to refer back to somebody in the sentence. For example, I hurt myself. So I hurt myself. The self refers back to, in this case, to I, the subject of the sentence. Judy hurt, or Professor Paparozzi hurt herself. It refers back to Professor Paparozzi. She injured herself. It refers back to whoever the she is, okay? So that's when you use it. It has to refer back to somebody, okay? So a lot of people will say, she and her and myself. Again, the myself is not referring back to her. It has to refer back to the person that we're using the myself for. So it has to refer back to an I. So she and myself attended the trial. It's she and I attended the trial. So unless it refers back to somebody or some other pronoun in the sentence, you cannot use the self words. Myself, yourself, himself, herself, etc. The accident was witnessed by Mrs. Hendricks and myself. Again, myself is not referring back to somebody, so you'd have to say the accident was witnessed by Mrs. Hendricks and me. Okay, letter C under number 7. Yes, number 7 on page 6. Relative pronouns. The relative pronouns are words like who, whom, this, it, that, such, and which. So real quickly about who and whom, a lot of people get this wrong. Who is the subject of the sentence, and whom, the relative pronoun whom, receives an action. So if in the sentence you have any doubt if it's who or whom, if who is doing the action, it's definitely who. If whom is receiving an action, it's definitely whom. W-H-O-M. So if it's receiving the action, remember that we need that extra M in the word, okay? So for example, on page 6, the incorrect, the man whom is being arraigned is 22 years old. Well, here's a clue right away. I saw the verb to be, is, okay? So once I see the verb to be, is, in a sentence, I know that has to be the subject and the object of the sentence have to be a subject pronoun. So then that's who, okay? Remember I said who is the doer of the action. The man who is being arraigned is 22 years old. Okay, the second one is incorrect. This is the woman who I mentioned earlier. So I mentioned her. If you know I mentioned her, her receives the action of being mentioning. So it has to be whom, because her or this woman is receiving an action from who I mentioned earlier, that part of the sentence. This is the woman that the verb to be doesn't apply there because who is not by the verb to be. It's with the verb who I mentioned. So it's correct is this is the woman whom I mentioned earlier. So if one of the objects pronouns would fit in like I mentioned her, then we know we go to whom because they're both object pronouns. To who am I speaking? Well, here's that prepositional phrase, to what, okay? So, but if flip it around, you can say, who am I speaking? Whom am I speaking to? Or I am speaking to whom, Okay, but that little preposition, that to, tells you it's going to be the objective case, just like we saw with between you and me. Okay, so anything after a preposition like to has to be in the objective, an objective pronoun, so that would be whom in this case. So here are some examples. Who is testifying tomorrow? Well, the testifying is being done by the who person, whoever it is, so that's correct, because it's, so he or she is testifying tomorrow. So no, who is subject, he is subject, and a she is subject of pronouns. Whom did you depose today? Now, in this case, the person being deposed is the whom, and he's receiving the action of the whom, of the being deposed. So that's why you go to the objective case. And you did depose him or her. Good. So use who to refer to humans, as in the paralegal who was hired. A lot of people use that, which I only use with non-humans, that or which. A lot of times your spell check will correct it and put that when you had who, but I would prefer that you use who when referring to humans and that or which when you're referring to non-humans, okay? And that versus which is the last thing we're going to cover in this video. That is used in a restrictive clause, a clause that is essential to the meaning of the sentence, whereas which is used in a non-restrictive clause, a clause that adds material, non-essential information into the sentence. And what we do is a lot of times with that we don't use a comma, and with the which we always use a comma. So it's really not terribly important to understand the difference, but here's a great example of when we use which. Halfway down in the paragraph that begins with that versus which. The corporation, comma, which was formed in Delaware, comma, has no assets. See, you're giving essential, non-essential information, because look at the sentence without using what's between the commas. The corporation has no assets. That's fine. But the additional information was formed in Delaware. Well, that's not really that important. Yeah, maybe it is important, but it's not important to complete the sentence, to have a complete thought. So if you can take it out, that's fine. You set it off with commas. That information is called a positive. It's just extra information that we don't need. Okay. So other than that, let's look at page 7, and we'll go to some examples. Oh, beginning on page 7 at the top. My car, comma, which was brand new, comma, was damaged in the collision. The fact that it was brand new is really unessential, non-essential to this sentence. So we use which and we set it off with commas. But look at the next example. The car that was damaged in the collision was my car. Now, that was really important that we mentioned that the car that was damaged was, in fact, my car. So that was damaged in the collision. It's really important, and note it is not set off by commas. Go down to the incorrect and correct. The corporation held their annual meeting in May. Okay, this is my biggest pet peeve of all. If you have a singular noun and you're using a pronoun to refer to it, like Professor Paparozzi has her car in the driveway. So Professor Paparozzi is a female, and it's her car, not their car or whatever. You always use a single noun like Professor Paparozzi. You use a singular pronoun, his, her, or its, and not their. This is the most common mistake I see on the television, in TV. Everyone does this wrong. Okay, so let's learn once and for all. If you're referring to a singular noun like a country, a lot of people will use their because they think, well, the country's full of people. No, it's a singular noun. We must use a singular pronoun. So the corporation held their annual meeting in May. Now, of course, you're thinking the corporation is a lot of people, but in English, corporation is one thing. So we have to refer to it as it. So correctly, the corporation held its annual meeting in May. Okay? Another word, the court. The court issued their opinion. Well, you think the court's got a lot of people inside of it. No, the court is one thing. The court issued its opinion. Now, this is extremely important because this is the one that gets on my nerves the most. If you're referring to a country and saying it had, the country of Ukraine has a lot of problems there. Their people, blah, blah, blah. Well, the country of Ukraine is one country, so its problems. So any country referred to, if it's singular, you're going to use the word it. For the possessive, you're going to use its, its, with no apostrophe, okay? So keep that in mind because that's the one thing that really aggravates me. Okay, the next topic we're going to have on our third video is going to be punctuation on page 8, but that'll be a separate video, okay? Thank you.